guest now is an author who has written novels such as Scrapper and In the House Upon the Dirt Between the Lake and the Woods, and is also the author now of Appleseed, as well as an alumni of Oakland University. Matt Bell joins us on the Megacast. Matt, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate having you on. So first off, this is not your first novel that you've written. Appleseed is one of many that you have written. Where did your love of writing begin, and where did that love of writing then get focused into writing novels and to writing short stories?
Sure. Thanks so much. I was a lifelong reader. I grew up a voracious reader. And I think the real first stories I wrote were a kind of reader response. I just wanted to make more of the things I liked and loved. And so, in some ways, writing is a part of reading too, that sort of enjoying art made me want to make art. But I started writing seriously in my early 20s, right before coming to Oakland University. And yeah, been at it ever since. So I think I've really mostly written fiction. So from the first time I started writing, it was in that form.
And so where does your writing process begin? For every writer, whether they're writing short stories, they're writing novels, they're writing screenplays, that onset, that idea generation, and where you go from there is different for everyone across the board. So for you, as you are developing a story, where does your process start? Where do you go from there? And then how long about does it take you to then craft a full story like you would have in a novel such as Appleseed?
Yeah, I would say in Appleseed, which I'll just show here, I started really with a single image. I had part of the novel is a mythological retelling of the Johnny Appleseed folktale, as if Johnny Appleseed was a half human, half animal faun from Greek myth. And so I had this initial image of that character sort of planting in the 1800s in the Midwest. And then the book becomes this 1,000-year environmental climate speculative science fiction novel. But I discovered most of that writing. So it becomes from this one image, and the rest of it sort of grows as I go. I rarely start with a plan or an outline or know in advance what I'm going to be doing. Appleseed took about 3.5 years to write, from sort of that first image to the final version I sent to my publishers.
So as you're going through that process, and as you said, there's not quite that definitive plan that you're laying out of, okay, here's the outline of my story, I'm going to do this, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen. It kind of comes together organically. 3.5 years to write Appleseed. As you're going along that process, what sort of changes do happen along the way? What sort of shifts have to be made in your writing process that ultimately lead to a novel like this taking 3.5 years to write and ultimately coming out in its final form?
Yeah, I think the first draft of a novel for me is a really exploratory generative process. I'm sort of figuring out what the book I'm writing is. I'm figuring out what it's interested in, what I'm interested in it. I'm doing a lot of research, and so the book's changing as I'm researching. So there's this first draft that is kind of a baggy, misshaped thing that is, the result of that process. I do eventually outline and move it toward a hopefully more pleasing narrative structure. But I do think there's a turn where you go from the writer-based version of the book that's really for me and my process and my exploration to something that will create an experience for the reader. And so as you do that, you're moving toward hopefully a more, well-built sort of structure and a more pleasing story. And that is definitely part of the process. I think as it goes on, it becomes more for other people, the closer it gets to the end. And then, of course, now lives primarily in readers and not in me. And I think that's a really pleasing transition in the process.
So can you tell us a little bit about your writing style? Because for every single author, there's a different style. Sometimes it's kind of fusions of those that they're inspired by, or there's similarities between one author and another. So for those that haven't read a book by you before, Matt, what can they expect if they read Appleseed or they read another one of your novels or short stories?
Yeah, I think that's great. Trying to tell the best story I can. I think the books tend to be sort of described as weird, right? Sort of a lot of kind of odd stuff happening. They're definitely out there in certain ways. This novel is I think of it as like a science fiction novel or a speculative novel, although it covers like 1,000 years of time. So there's different parts of different things. Really, this particular book inspired in part by writers like Ursula K. Le Guin, is one of my favorite science fiction novelists. There's a lot of nature writing in the book. I thought a lot about like Annie Dillard's work or Wendell Berry's work and thinking about the way I'm writing about that. The politics of the book were inspired by writers like Naomi Klein. A big part of the book is about agriculture, especially in the future, sort of industrial agriculture systems, and reading books by people like Michael Pollan and people like that. So, it becomes this sort of all these different influences come in, right? And they're all kind of working together and combining with your own imagination, your lived experience to hopefully make something new. But I think if people like any of those writers, like there's a lot to hopefully enjoy in this as well. There's also kind of a base of like myth in it too. There's a retelling of the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice that's tied through it. And then, of course, this retelling of Johnny Appleseed. So, you can see it's sort of a bit of a stew of different things that are all coming together in this way. But I think that's an enjoyable part of writing for me. I always say that one way to write a novel is just to put like everything you love in it, they'll make you love the book while you're writing it and hopefully make other people love it too. And so there's a little bit of that here. Like it's just a lot of things that I like put together and worked and to tell this story.
We're joined by Matt Bell, author of many novels such as Appleseed. You can learn more information about Appleseed and all of his other books, including novels, essays, short stories, and more by visiting his website, mattbell.com. That is mattbell.com. And of course, Matt, you are an alumnus of Oakland University and recently helped them celebrate their 10th anniversary of their creative writing program. How did your time at Oakland University and how has something like their creative writing program helped to inspire you as an author and ultimately stuck with you in your writing process as you've written multiple novels now, short stories, and more?
Yeah, thanks. I went to Oakland from 2004 to 2006. And for me, it was a great place. I really felt a home there. I felt like the professors I had took me really seriously and treated me, as a writer, before there was like evidence that I might really be one, right? And I really appreciated that. And there's still things that I learned in my classes there that I teach in my own classes or think about in my own process. I had coffee this morning with one of my professors, Kitty Dubin, who's a playwriting professor there. And I was telling her at breakfast, like, I can still see some of the handouts she used to teach us like story writing structure, like in my mind when I think about some of those things, I feel really lucky to have been there. And I feel lucky to still be connected to that community. It's amazing to have left, 15 years ago and still feel like I'm connected to the professors there and to other students I went to class with, and hopefully to the future of what people are doing at Oakland.
So in addition to being a writer yourself, to being a novelist yourself, and having, of course, mentioned all your experiences and the positive experience you had at Oakland University, how are you tailoring that to what you're doing today? Because now you are also teaching English. You're teaching at Arizona State University as a creative writing teacher. How does your educational background at Oakland University and your career thus far help to inform you on how you teach your students and approach helping them through their education as they learn to write creatively and maybe become the authors of the future?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's definitely an extension of all those experiences. I mentioned the last question about really feeling connected to the professors and feeling like they were people that cared about what I was doing and that the work I did mattered. And certainly that's something I'm trying to make in my own classrooms, that, I think educational success often comes from like students feeling a strong bond with professors and feeling like they're part of a community. And certainly we're trying to create that the best we can. And of course, like the things how to do really well inform your teaching. But some of the things that I think I now teach best are the things that I'm weakest at as a writer, right? Like having to learn how to teach the things that don't come naturally to me is actually been really satisfying. And so I think there is that. And I think also in creative writing, usually your teachers are practitioners as well, right? So they're a fellow writer and sort of letting students see and share in your own sort of journey and your own artistic sort of struggles as you're writing books is part of it, and sort of being open in that way. So I always try to make a environment where students can imagine themselves succeeding in the same ways, and also letting them see like the kind of reality of the work and the life.
We're joined by Matt Bell, author of many different books and novels, such as Appleseed. You can learn more information by visiting his website, mattbell.com. To learn more about all of his different writings and get in contact with him as well. And learn more about Appleseed at mattbell.com/Appleseed. And so, as we've mentioned previously, that's not your only novel. You've written many different other stories. So if after telling us more about Appleseed, some people may not be interested in that particular story. Tell us about some of your other works and give us a brief overview of some of those that people may be interested in as well.
Sure. My first novel, In the House Upon the Dirt Between the Lake and the Woods, takes place in a kind of mythological space. It's really a novel about marriage and parenthood, and what happens to maybe a marriage when people don't have the children they want to have. But it's in sort of a mythic framework. There's a giant talking bear. The wife is able to sing objects into being. It's a kind of wild book. My second novel, Scrapper, takes place in contemporary Detroit. It's set in the sort of illegal metal scavenging industry in Detroit proper, and it's kind of a detective story set in that environment, and really emplaced here in Michigan and in Detroit and in some of the like contemporary issues of the city.
We're joined by Matt Bell, author of many different books, including Appleseed. You can learn more about Appleseed by visiting his website, mattbell.com/Appleseed. That is mattbell.com/Appleseed. And so, Matt, you said 3.5 years to get Appleseed written and ready for publishing and release. It is now out. It is available. You can learn more, of course, on your website, mattbell.com/Appleseed, and find it in a number of different places, including your local bookshop, IndieBound, Barnes & Noble, HarperCollins, on Amazon. It was Amazon's Book of the Month this past summer in July of 2021. So for you, now with Appleseed out, what's next? What's on the horizon? What are your next stories that you have planned?
Sure. I have a book coming out next month called Refuse to be Done, that is a guide to novel writing through the lens of rewriting revisions. That'll be out in a couple weeks. And then I'm working on the next novel, slowly making progress on that. And if that 3.5 year path holds true, maybe I'm about halfway through that one. But yeah, so it's always nice to be in the middle of something and to have that sort of thing to look forward to. So hopefully Refuse to be Done in March, and then this next novel sometime in the next couple of years.
Stay up to date on when Refuse to be Done will be ready to go and ready for you to be reading yourself by visiting mattbell.com. Matt, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.